Hi, my name is Ryan Roberts. I'm an apprentice for 2019 at Rancho Mastatal. I graduated from Western Washington University with a bachelor's in business sustainability and a minor in entrepreneurship and innovation.
What led you here to Rancho Mastatal?
Something clicked for me in reading a book called The Permaculture City, written by Toby Hemingway. In the book The Permaculture City, about permaculture being a principle that can be applied to a lot of other spheres aside from just growing food in gardens. And so when I read that, at the time I was involved in some sustainability work, helping companies and communities adopt more sustainable practices. And I started to see a lot of correlation between the language that's used in sustainability and the language that's used in permaculture, empathy-based design, facilitated process, that sort of thing. And so I got really excited about going deeper into permaculture, and the ranch is a sustainability education center that practices permaculture principles. And so I felt that by coming here I might obtain a better understanding of that lens, that I might adopt that lens so that I could apply it to the realm of business and also to helping communities adapt and mitigate their impact on climate.
So what do you think the original purpose of the ranch was, and then how do you think it has changed?
I couldn't speak to the original purpose necessarily for Timo and Robin, but what I could say, I think, would be that they were looking for. I perceive that they were looking for an alternative to sort of like the Peace Corps style of service, where you have people coming into communities and. I don't know if this is how it's currently practiced, but perhaps back in the day, sustainable development and or assistance to developing countries was a bit patriarchal, I think, in a lot of ways. It wasn't very service-based in the sense that people were bringing solutions and money to people, as opposed to helping those people discover their own solutions by asking the right questions, and then bringing the resources to bear when those people want to do that thing. And so coming here, they were looking for an extended place-based, to create an extended place-based learning operation or learning opportunity for people that wanted to come here and learn about sustainable living. And in doing so, they've, become a real part of this community, helping them achieve the goals that they're looking for, and introducing a much-needed injection of jobs and money and purchasing power into the community. And so I think that was really their goal from the get-go. The heart and soul of the ranch is in natural building, and in using, the term is a bit amorphous when we talk about natural building, but using materials from on-site or from regional areas, employing people locally in the harvest and processing and installation of those materials. Those are all things that were part of their vision, I think, from maybe, if not from the very beginning, from fairly early on. They were informed a lot by their experience in the Peace Corps. So,
as far as people who work here, what's the makeup of that community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have two full-time employed people who do our cooking. And for guests and for people here in educational programs like the apprenticeship or the internship, and for the core team. And then there's a variety of housekeepers that help us maintain the property in the structures that we have here. Then there's also caretakers help make sure that the property itself is well maintained outside of our structures. So, and then there's two of those people. And then we have two people who are involved fairly regularly in sort of construction and maintenance of the structures, like roofing or making foundations, things of that nature. And then we have, so I think it's in total 8 people employed here directly at the ranch. If you were looking more at like the indirect economic benefits of what they do here, that number would grow significantly because the buying power of what we represent here, we're putting out about 22,000 meals a year, last I was told. And so all that food either has to be grown here or it has to be purchased from people, and we do choose to, the ranch leadership does choose to have a preferential purchasing sort of policy for people regionally and locally.
So, as far as like hiring people from the community, creating jobs that way, what are some other ways that you impact the community? Like Jacob was saying about testing out different crop variants.
Sure.
Are there any that come to mind that like you can remember specific examples that helped in that way?
Yeah, so your first question about other ways that we impact the community, one of those is that, and I'm not certain if this is laid out in a policy, but I've observed it on a number of occasions, is that the ranch is very liberal in buying just about anything that people bring here. So if somebody has chickens, we'll probably buy them. If somebody has a pig that they want to sell us to help make rent or just to have a little extra disposable income, we'll usually buy it. Same goes for eggs. We also tend to pay a significantly inflated rate for the products that we purchase to help support those local relationships. And many of them are very long-standing. The person who sells us our eggs has been doing so for well over a decade. I don't have an exact number on that. It may be that she's been supplying us eggs since the very beginning. So those relationships are very deep, and it's important to us to maintain them. So we do pay a premium for those products. So if you imagine what that looks like for someone like, say, a woman who's raising her kids at home while her partner is working, which is a common scenario here, or for a single mother raising her children, the ability to have perhaps some chickens that she can sell to the ranch and feel confident that we will buy them is I think a very subtle way that the ranch uses the privilege of their disposable income, or just our general privilege. I wouldn't say that the folks here are rich, but that's one way that we leverage that disposable income to just in our everyday activities to assist the community. In terms of the productive capacity of the ranch, the way I've been told it is that we have 3 goals at the ranch for our productive agroforestry spaces and our annuals. And that is to be a hands-on learning experience for people like me and like you, and to produce food for the kitchen. And then the last one is what you had alluded to, which is the, I wouldn't say research, but experimentation. And what that looks like is, planting a ton of different varieties of a certain tree crop, trying different fertilizer regimens, different amounts of inputs. And when I say fertilizer, that's all from the cow manure that we process and ferment on site from our neighbor less than a kilometer away. So nothing synthetic, but we might do some sort of ABC testing to figure out what seems to work best. It also looks like the sort of crops we grow. So lately we've taken a huge interest in jackfruit. Not, I would say, so much as a meat replacement, but just because it tastes great, it stores really well with the method that we use, and because it produces vast quantities of food. And so even though, maybe cultural people here aren't used to something like that, given some time and a really well-developed understanding of how to grow it, how to graft it perhaps, how to feed those plants, we can then disseminate that information. When we're confident in its veracity, we can disseminate that information to the people in the community so that they can start growing more of their own food. So the goal there would be sort of greater food sovereignty for this rural community. And that's a really big, important, I think, key in what Timo or Tim O'Hara has referred to as re-ruralization. I think that actually, when I was talking about the natural building, that's one of the interest areas, but I think that one of the core components of what gets them out of bed, what makes them excited, is about this sort of re-ruralization in this community. Places like this that have experienced a lot of brain drain. They're young, bright people leaving to go to college because there aren't jobs here. And so being able to reverse that narrative is really important to them. And one of those aspects is something like food sovereignty, where they don't have to travel all the way to Parita or to Puriscal to get their groceries. They can grow a little bit more of their own food themselves and be a bit more free that way.
Maybe just talk about like what your day-to-day activity looks like.
Yeah. So day to day, as an apprentice here for the 11-month program, it revolves around 3 skills. The first one is a life skill, which are essentially glorified chores, but they're things that you might not do, in an urban setting, for example. So one of them, the one I'm doing currently, is the biodigester. And that is a technical skill that we need to learn how to do, but they're not necessarily fun, but they're things that ensure that the ranch, works smoothly. And that's from 6:30 in the morning to 8 o'clock. They don't always take that long, but but that time is allocated there for us to complete that task and anything else we need to do. 8 o'clock we have breakfast. Breakfast goes for half an hour. Then the apprentices and the core team gather in the room over here in our library to do a morning meeting, which usually doesn't last any more than 10 minutes, usually about 7 minutes or so. And we go over the activities of the day, any visitors that are coming, the activities and visitors of the next day, as well as any announcements or reminders that people need based on how we live here. After that, we usually have a work party in the AM, and that goes from 9:30 to 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock is lunchtime. Work party is usually a specific topic like natural building, Zone 1, which is our annual agriculture. It could be agroforestry out in the orchards. It could be food and fermentation. Those are some of the major areas that we have. And it'll be organized by one of the core team members, and then we'll go out and we'll do that for that allocated time, 3.5 hours. And then we'll have lunch at 1 o'clock. You'll hear it because the conch. And then 1 o'clock to 2:30 you have for eating lunch. And then on let's see, I always get this wrong, but two of the 5 days of the week we have a double work party. So we have one in the AM and then one in the PM starting at 2:30, and then that one goes till 5. So our longest days are maybe what does that come out to be, like 6 hours of scheduled time, but generally we have a pretty good work-life balance. And then after 5 we have till 6:45 as just open time for us to take care of ourselves, our bodies, play cards, things like that. 6:45 we have dinner. We gather for circle, have a little time for everybody to share gratitude or whatever that might be. Just hold silence, and then it might be a cleanup shift, and then we head to bed. Most people usually go to bed pretty early here, just because it's the natural pattern of the place. Wake up early, go to sleep early. And then some days we have a community check-in on Fridays where the whole community will gather here. That includes the core team and the apprentice team, and we'll gather just to share how we're doing, how we're feeling emotionally. We'll usually divide it up into circles and square, and the circle is for more emotional, soft type stuff, and then the square is more logistics, more planning based stuff. On Thursdays we also have a check-in, but that's with our respective teams. So the core team will have their meeting, the apprentice team will have our meeting, and that's an opportunity for us to discuss internally with our teams what needs to get done.
So I know, like, I'm here obviously with a group. What are some other ways like people experience the place?
So the ranch has sort of like two major revenue streams, and that's that's people staying here. Either because they're just a visitor, hospitality, they want to come see the place, or through the courses that they offer. And then, of course, if they're offering a course, then people stay here as well. So those two things are kind of intertied, and that's the main ways that we sort of take advantage of people being here, wanting to come here and participate, are through the interns, the apprentices, the core team, and then scheduled visits from groups like Winterline, for example. So in that time, we'll construct a curriculum if that's what the group wants, or sometimes we're just a hospitality arrangement. It depends. So in the case that we're just hospitality, we're doing food, we're making sure that your living spaces are good. when a group like Winterline comes and they say, okay, we really want to talk about like bamboo, like you did yesterday, we want to learn about fermentation, natural building, whatever it is, then we'll construct a curriculum and teach that. It'll either be the core team during most of the year or during the 2 months of the apprenticeship where the interns are here and the core team is gone. Then it's the apprentices teaching all those classes to visitors who might be here, teaching what we've learned. And so that's the main mode in which people are able to participate here. Sometimes when we've got visitors who come here for like a month at a time, we can absolutely plug those people into work. Over time, the ranch has moved away from being a volunteer-based project. In the beginning, for the maybe the first half or perhaps even longer of the ranch's history, 18 years, almost 19 years old now, was entirely or mostly volunteer-based. And as time goes on, they've been looking, and their curriculum has improved, and the quality of the experience has evolved. They've looked to ask for more commitment out of people than just sort of randomly showing up on a bus, perhaps with no warning or anything like that. And so that's evolved into really well-established educational modules that we teach. And so with that has come the general phasing out of like woofer volunteer type work, which was the mainstay of the ranch for a long time. And now it's definitely a far greater emphasis on people who come here through the internship or the apprenticeship.
So, like, how long have you been here? And also, how long do you plan to stay? Do you have any sort of future plans? And, like, if so, if it doesn't involve being here, how will you take what you've learned here and, like...
Yeah. So what's next, and how long have I been here? So my partner and I have been here for going on 10 months now, really, really close to 10 months. So we're entering into that last phase of the program where we can really dive into our specialization, our area of interest. And the plan from the beginning was that we would maybe have a soft landing when we got back with either her family or with my family, so that we could kind of figure out that direction afterwards. For me, this experience has been a huge shaking of my snow globe, if we use that analogy, in redefining my priorities, clarifying my vision, challenging some of my assumptions, getting me to like reconfigure a little bit some of my thoughts on sustainability, which is the work I'm involved in the States. And so the path out of here has been more or less unclear in terms of what exactly we would do when we got back. But coming here was a big leap of faith, and assuming that after we got done with this, that we would just be empowered with a lot of different skills that might take us into new career paths for my partner and I, or that might take us to other countries, and that faith has been perhaps it's luck, perhaps it's that we've been putting ourselves out there that way, but it's been rewarded in that there's a possibility that Abby and I will be taking the skills that we've learned here with us to China. My folks were away in China and made some wonderful connections there with people who have been tasked with creating a spotlight or a showcase eco-village in China. And they would like to learn about our experience there and get our help in making some changes. So that's turned up. That's super exciting for the two of us. I know that Abby would like to really utilize her fermentation skills in a professional setting because she's been doing the meal planning as well as the food preservation through fermentation and brewing here at the ranch. So it's a bit of I think a tough thing for everybody who comes here to be like, gosh, what do I do next? Because it's this incredibly inspiring place. A lot of different lifestyles, majorly different lifestyle from what most people I think in the States live, and so coming out of here, it's easy to feel a little like on unsteady ground as to what to do next. But we're really just taking it on faith that that what we've learned is going to empower us, not just in our personal lives, but also in a professional capacity. The consulting company I work for is eager to have me back. And this is a bit of a sabbatical for me, essentially, was to leave there and come here and adopt this sort of lens or this understanding of permaculture and apply it to business. And that's exactly what I've done. So coming back there, it'll be fun to plug back into that work.
Very interesting. Okay, I'll wrap it up now because we've been going for like 20 minutes, but it's been very interesting. So this last question, I want to ask you about the toughest aspect of living here that you've experienced, and then on the flip side of that, the most surprising maybe experience or realization you've had from being here.
The toughest. The environment here is very different from what I'm used to, and so this is very subjective for me. But living in Washington, where we get seasons, distinct seasons that change, are kind of constantly changing, really. Whereas here, there's a sort of timeless quality to the fact that even though we're in the rainy season right now, which is distinct from the dry season, it's not that much different. You know, it's greener, but the temperature is just a little bit lower, but it's very uniform throughout the whole year. The insects can be a challenge at times, though I think we're here at the ranch, most people would say that our insect pressures are actually fairly minimal. But for me, coming from Washington, where we really don't have that, that is intense for me. The physical labor is a whole new game because the humidity is so intense here, and because it does get so hot. There are times of the year where it's like 100% humidity and like 95 degrees, and that's pretty brutal at times. So that's an adjustment. I would also say just shifting my schedule from more of like a morning person from an evening person. I think a lot of people, perhaps in my generation, have just invariably become night owls. Because, you know, the music events are late at night, they go to till in the morning. You know, you play video games super late with your buddies, parties, things like that. So or studying could be even a thing that takes us into the late hours of the night. And so I've always been a night owl, and, you know, coming here and seeing that everybody kind of wakes up with the sun is an adjustment. So those are all challenges. Aside from the environment, I would say that this is perhaps a more concise answer. Biggest challenge of living here is learning how to live with other people in a really tight-knit setting. And I think a lot of people would probably say that. And it's not unique to the ranch. It's not unique even to, you know, any of the roommates that I've lived with over the years, where you run into challenges with just different values or different lifestyles or different, you know, some people we all live differently. And so being here at the ranch and finding a harmony in all that stuff is an enormous challenge. And I think actually something profound for me here at the ranch has been that we portray ourselves in a lot of ways here at the ranch as a natural building or a sustainability education center or permaculture, intentional living. It's an intentional community, though, that rotates slowly year to year. And that intentional living component of things is really a fundamental skill to be able to, like, coexist with people and cohabitate with people in a peaceful manner, in a way that manages conflict wisely, in a way that leans into discomfort with difficult conversations. That's profound in a really big way, because our issues worldwide aren't a lack of skill or knowledge mostly. They're interpersonal issues between people or communities. And so it's a bit of a microcosm of it here. We have multiple people from the US, we have a person from New Zealand, from Israel, from Australia. So people from all over the world, and different value structures and different ideas of what the good life looks like. So that's really interesting to me. I would say that's the biggest, most profound challenge of living here. It's also the biggest probably one of the biggest learning opportunities I've had. In terms of what has surprised me, I had just started to develop an understanding, or to come to an understanding of some of these topics about privilege and cultural identity and appropriation, and some of these topics that are sort of hot button issues right now, I think, in our generation, but also in the broader scheme in the United States and elsewhere. And when I got here, I just so happened to start reading into a lot of historical, anthropological work, and began to develop a much better understanding of why Latin America is underdeveloped, and why people here continue to struggle with just having access to basic stuff, high quality goods, why people here just don't get paid as much as people in the United States, why it's harder for them to send their kids to college, and why these countries have a lot of difficulty extracting themselves or lifting themselves up. And so that's been a huge awareness change for me, is recognizing that there's this sort of pattern that's a bit like 500 years old, that's been sort of repeated with different players over time, that's led to sort of similar outcomes in Latin America, as well as Africa, as well as Asia, as in terms of how Western or developed nations have treated the people here. And that awareness has been really fundamental for me, that change in awareness, that sort of expanding of my empathetic bubble. And that will make an enormous impact on my work in sustainability, because the countries that we really need to be involved in for example, reversing climate change are all of them. And many of them still are nursing the wounds of the consequences of colonialism and imperialism and capitalism. And those countries don't necessarily feel indebted, or necessarily they don't feel the need to participate in those things, because they would rather spend their money lifting their people out of poverty. And here the white countries of the world tell them that they need to slow their progress so that we all don't suffer enormous consequences from climate change. And then to them it sounds tone deaf, because we have all the money. So that's been a big shift. I read a book called Open Veins of Latin America that really blew my mind on that. And that was kind of the big turning point. Another one was 1491. That was a big one. So yeah, I would say environment was challenging. Learning how to live with people was challenging. Learning how to live intensely with people, because we're eating, working, sleeping, playing together all the time, you know. And then the last one being sort of that new and improved awareness about the privilege I have of having grown up in a developed country where my parents had been able to save for my college education, where they had disposable income to travel, and just the benefits that afforded me that not everybody else has.
Mm-hmm. So, very nice talking to you.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Any closing remarks, closing notes you want to add, or?
Yeah, for those who who are curious about the experience at the ranch, I encourage people who are really self-driven learners to look into this experience. Really change your life, and people who are excited about an alternative to the sort of agreed upon way of doing things, I think will find themselves pleased with not only what they see here, but the exciting opportunities this sort of life-changing experience can bring to their life. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Once again, nice talking to you.
Nice chatting with you as well.